Fair use. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.
Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I appreciate all the support I received from you. And as always, all the information in my videos is rumors taken from the internet or the street. I'm not saying the information is fact. In depth, the murder of L.A. Capone, 600. This is the fourth episode of the series In Depth. In this episode, I'll be covering the murder of L.A. Capone from 600, who was shot and killed in late September 2013. L.A. Capone, whose real name was Leonard Anderson, was a prominent figure in Chicago's gang culture and later gained national attention as he, along with Lil Durk and Chief Keef, dominated the city's rap scene. However, this video won't focus on L.A. Capone's music career. Instead, I'll dive deep into the events surrounding his death, providing a detailed breakdown and highlighting aspects you may have missed. I hope you enjoy this episode. As most people know, L.A. Capone wasn't just a rapper, he was a fully committed member of 600 and had even admitted to having a body. His confirmed kill was P5 from Jaro City, which he carried out alongside King Von and J Money. It was a brutal execution, with all three standing over P5, shooting him 6 times in the face and 9 times in the body. L.A. Capone, King Von, and J Money were not shy about boasting about the murder on X, formerly Twitter. In addition to that, L.A. Capone was known for shooting, robbing, and fighting, making him highly active in the streets. His notoriety in both the streets and the music scene made him a prime target for his enemies. September 26th marks the tragic day when L.A. Capone's life came to a sudden end. To understand the full story, we'll begin at the start of that fateful day. Between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., L.A. Capone, J.B. Bin Laden from 400D, and Ocho from O Block attended court for a trespassing case. After the trial, they returned home for a brief stay before deciding to head to a studio to record music. Around 3 p.m., L.A. Capone and J.B. Bin Laden headed to a studio located on the second floor of 7034 Stony Island, a territory controlled by Zola and ABM. While not considered an enemy block, it wasn't their home turf either. A few members from both O Block and 600 had family ties with members from Zola and ABM. L.A. and J.B. spent about 2.5 hours in the studio before their session ended, and they decided to head home. A video from this session, recorded by J.B., exists and feels eerie to watch. The song he recorded is called Brothers.
What that is though? Just record. This gonna be a hit song, man. You recording this shit? Get this shit on camera, man. Get this shit on fuck.
While L.A. Capone was in the studio with J.B., members of enemy gangs, Lil Mick and Rockhead from 051 Young Money, along with Mako from Met Boys, were attending a barbecue at 51st and Prairie. Suddenly, Rockhead, also known as Rocco, received a phone call from Hard Knock, a member of 035-757. On the phone, Hard Knock was telling Rockhead that L.A. Capone was at the studio dissing 051YM in a song. Hard Knock was actually at the studio together with L.A. JB, a former member of 051YM, and the owner of the studio, working on his own rap song. At the time, 035-757 wasn't really viewed as enemies, despite their connections to 051 Young Money. There were even family ties between 635-757, and Hard Knock was primarily seen as a rapper rather than a gang member. After the phone call ended, Rockhead, Miko, and Lil Mick reached out to Big A from 051 Young Money and met him at the gas station on 67th and Stony Island. They split up and drove to the studio in two separate vehicles, parking a few houses down, one at each end of the alley. They waited in their cars for 20 to 30 minutes for LA to leave the studio. When LA and JB exited through the back of the studio, they sat on the porch waiting for a ride. After a few minutes, LA Capone grew impatient, perhaps sensing something was off, and began walking home while talking on the phone, likely trying to arrange a ride home. Tay Capone, who was known as Tay 600 at the time, offered him a ride that day but couldn't arrive for about 10 minutes. LA, however, declined and decided just to walk instead since he did not live too far away. There are rumors that L.A. Capone texted Lil Durk at that time, stemming from the lyrics in Lil Durk's song Made It Out, where he raps, "I was so high, I wish I replied to L.A.'s text." However, this is not accurate. The text from L.A. Capone was sent earlier that day and was not him asking for a ride home. Hard Knock left the studio around the same time, accompanied by Snoop from 757. As soon as L.A. entered the alley wearing a black hoodie, Lil Mick spotted him right away. He got out of his car and stealthily approached L.A., shooting him twice, once in the lower right back, where the bullet lodged above his kidney, and the other in his upper right thigh, exiting through his inner groin. L.A. collapsed to the ground, and Lil Mick stood over him to empty his magazine into L.A., but the weapon jammed. Mick then ran north up the alley, got back into his car, and both vehicles sped away. JB, who was still sitting on the porch when everything went down, immediately got up and ran to the alley where L.A. Capone was lying on the ground. He tried to help him while screaming, "Bro, you're good, bro." A few minutes later, the ambulance arrived and transported L.A. to Northwestern Hospital. He was still conscious when they arrived and stated that a car had pulled up in the alley before he heard 5 or 6 shots and got hit. The shooter, also wearing a black hoodie, ran back to the car, and then they all fled. When asked if he could identify the shooter, he responded, "I don't know." L.A. lost consciousness in the ambulance and never regained it before his death during surgery at around 8:30 p.m. In fact, L.A. Capone had been shot in the exact same place a year earlier, his right upper rear thigh, by Bostrel from STL/EBT. This prior injury could be a reason why L.A. did not survive his wounds. Later that very same night, all 4 involved in the murder met in Washington Park where they discussed that they had successfully killed L.A. Capone. Interestingly, Lil Mick and L.A. Capone, who had a history of fighting each other, lived fairly close to one another. Lil Mick resided on the 7000 block of South Chapel Avenue, while L.A. lived on the 7000 block of South Bennett Avenue, roughly half a mile apart. The studio was situated between their homes, making it an equal distance from both of their places. Hard Knock, the man responsible for setting up L.A. Capone, was very familiar with the studio and frequented it often. However, during police questioning, he denied knowing about L.A.'s conflicts with 051 and claimed he didn't know Rocco, Mako, Big A, or Lil Mick, nor that he made a phone call. However, later in the investigation, the former 051 member, who was also at the studio, admitted that Hard Knock did in fact call Rocco, but claimed it was just to come smoke weed. Both the 051 member and the studio owner saw through this and recognized it as a setup. They told Hard Knock to call Rockhead back and tell him not to come, knowing what would happen if 051 ran into LA. Despite this, the 051 members ignored the plea and went ahead with the plan, ultimately killing L.A. Capone. As many of you know, all three individuals involved in the hit were arrested and charged with the murder. Big A would have also faced arrest, but she was killed on November 14, 2013, allegedly by Bezu from THF 46. Rockhead was the first to be arrested, on August 20, 2014. Lil Mick was taken into custody the following day on the 21st, and Mako was arrested on the 22nd. All three individuals arrested cooperated with the police and turned on each other. Rockhead implicated Lil Mick as the one who killed L.A. Mick, in turn, snitched on THF 46 for Big A's murder and even told police that he believed Rocco was involved as well since he was in the car with Big A. Mako also pointed the finger at Mick, claiming he was the shooter and refused to let him back in the car. Lil Mick, caught in the middle, ended up being snitched on and then snitched back in a desperate attempt to avoid jail. Initially, Lil Mick was sentenced to 60 years in prison, but about a month ago, he won his appeal and had his sentence reduced to 20 years, meaning he'll be released in 2034. In 2017, Rockhead received a 30-year sentence and is set for release in 2038. Mako, on the other hand, was sentenced to 45 years and is expected to be released in 2059. Hard Knock was never charged due to lack of evidence. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment what you thought. Comment what you want to see next. God bless you all.